So on December 19th of 2025, as I'm sure most of you are probably aware, Jake Paul fought the two-time unified heavyweight champion.
I know on Twitter people are going to want their money back, or they're going to call it a bad fight or a sloppy fight or whatever, and then there's going to be people, celebrating.
Anthony Joshua won by knockout in the 6th round after Jake Paul was knocked down 4 times in total. Twice in the 5th round.
I gave it my all. It's fucking crazy. I had a blast, and thank you to all the fans and everyone.
It was the 6th round. I think it was the 4th round he got dropped twice. In the 5th round he got through it. In the 6th round, caught him with the jab, and a glancing.
The drama surrounding Jake Paul's boxing journey reached its most violent and defining chapter on a night that felt less like an exhibition and more like a reckoning. Under the bright lights of Miami, streamed globally on Netflix, the experiment finally collided with reality. Anthony Joshua, a 2-time unified heavyweight champion, stood across the ring from a man who built his boxing career on spectacle, controversy, and audacity. 6 rounds later, Jake Paul was on the canvas, his jaw shattered, his future uncertain, and the boxing world left to process what it had just witnessed. When the final punch landed, it didn't just end a fight. It ended an era of illusion. Joshua's knockout wasn't merely a technical stoppage. It was the punctuation mark at the end of a sentence boxing purists had been writing for years.
And twice in the 6th round. Anthony Joshua landed 48 punches on Jake Paul compared to Jake Paul landing about 16 on Anthony.
Jake's downfall, that was always going to be the case. Of course, the first time he gets rocked, dropped, and stopped, people are going to...
Played football my whole life. At the end of the day, it's coverage, knowing your plays, and then just being fast and willing.
Jake Paul had dared to cross the final bridge, to test himself against a true elite heavyweight, and the result was as brutal as it was inevitable. The sound of gloves meeting bone echoed louder than the cheers or jeers of the crowd, because it carried with it the weight of consequence. Jake Paul's own words afterward felt strangely calm, almost detached, as if he was trying to convince himself as much as the audience. He said he had fun. He said he loved the sport. He said he gave it his all. There was no bravado left, no smirk, no promise of revenge or redemption, just acceptance. And in boxing, acceptance often signals the end. Coming into the fight, Paul was riding a 2-fight winning streak.
Anthony Joshua. And this is the 2nd professional loss of Jake Paul's fighting career, dropping his record down to 12-2.
My hook, he goes down, and that was that. That was all she wrote, right? I did a lot.
Enough momentum to convince himself and his team that this leap wasn't suicide but destiny. He had spoken openly about his goals, about conquering boxing, and then walking away on his own terms. He even floated the idea of retiring to chase something even more absurd, an NFL career, confidently claiming he could play safety, run a 4.340, and bring ratings wherever he went. It sounded ridiculous, but that had never stopped Jake Paul before. His entire career was built on doing things people said he couldn't or shouldn't. Yet standing across from Anthony Joshua, the size difference alone told a story no hype package could erase. This wasn't a retired MMA fighter, not an undersized striker past his prime, not a name borrowed from another sport. This was a full-sized heavyweight champion, a man who had shared the ring with killers, who understood timing, distance, and punishment at a level Jake Paul had never experienced. From the opening bell, the fight felt less like a contest and more like a chase. Paul ran. He circled. He clinched. He lunged forward with awkward shots, desperate to land something meaningful, anything that might justify his presence. To some observers, it was survival. To others, it was avoidance. Duke McKenzie didn't mince words afterward, pointing out how undersized Jake looked, how every punch required him to jump in, overextend, and stumble back out of range. McKenzie compared it to a drunken kung fu movie, except without the mastery. It was awkward, chaotic, and ultimately pointless. Still, money changes perspective. McKenzie admitted what many critics won't say out loud. For $75 million, most people would step into that ring and accept the outcome. Pride has a price, and Jake Paul cashed the check. The difference is that Paul didn't just lose a fight. He lost credibility in the only arena that truly matters in boxing: legitimacy. The online reaction was swift and merciless. Some fans celebrated with open hostility, relieved to finally see Paul humbled. others expressed genuine concern as reports surfaced that Jake had been taken to the hospital with a suspected broken jaw. The jokes stopped when the X-rays surfaced. This wasn't cosmetic damage. This was structural, career-altering trauma. Michael Bisping, a former UFC champion who understands both combat sports and punishment, called it a masterclass from Joshua. He explained how the uppercuts and combinations left Jake nowhere to go, how running only delayed the inevitable. The damage to Paul's face was severe, and Bisping made it clear that recovery would not be optional. This wasn't something you shake off in a few weeks. This was the kind of injury that forces reflection. What made the fight even more damning was Joshua's demeanor. This wasn't a ferocious, prime Anthony Joshua hunting for a highlight reel finish. By many accounts, this was a subdued, almost cautious version of AJ, taking his time, figuring out the awkwardness, adjusting to the unpredictability of a beginner. And still, Jake Paul never worried him, never hurt him, never made him uncomfortable. As Bisping bluntly put it, it wasn't a fight. It was a question of how long Jake Paul could last. By the 4th round, Paul had already been dropped twice. By the 6th, it was over. A jab, a glancing right hook, and gravity did the rest. For knockdowns in total told a story the punch stats only confirmed. Joshua landed 3 times as many punches. The gap wasn't narrow. It was a canyon. Sean Jones addressed the conspiracy crowd head-on. Those who insisted the fight had to be rigged or scripted. Boxing doesn't work that way, especially not at this level. Anthony Joshua is not risking his legacy, his reputation, or his freedom for a YouTube sideshow. The broken jaw alone dismantled any remaining illusion. You don't script surgery. You don't fake plates and screws. Yet even Jones acknowledged the awkward moments early in the fight when Joshua appeared hesitant, when Jake landed a stiff jab that snapped AJ's head back. That fleeting success fed the narrative that maybe, just maybe, Jake belonged. But anyone who has sparred understands the truth. Beginners are awkward. They don't move like trained fighters. They throw punches you don't expect. And sometimes that unpredictability creates brief chaos. Eventually, skill asserts itself. And when it does, the result is usually violent. As the reality set in, warnings replaced mockery. Fans urged Jake not to return. Analysts like Liam Goff pointed out the obvious. With a broken jaw and significant recovery ahead, the avenues for Jake Paul's boxing career were effectively closed, at least for now. Healing had to come first, not just physically, but mentally. Because once you've been exposed at that level, you can't unsee it. One of the most telling moments came not in the ring, but before it, during the face-off. Against previous opponents, Jake had looked down, literally and figuratively. He was bigger, stronger, more confident. Against Anthony Joshua, he had to look up. And sometimes, looking up changes everything. It forces honesty. It strips away the persona. Jake Paul has always understood branding. He knew he had to sell the dream, to convince casual fans that this was a real fight, that he had a chance. And for a while he did. The build-up worked. The numbers were massive. But Fight Night exposed the difference between selling belief and surviving reality. The road runner routine, the constant movement, the refusal to engage, all revealed a fighter whose goal wasn't victory, but endurance. After surgery, Jake updated fans with gratitude and humility, thanking the medical team, acknowledging the pain, admitting he would be on liquids for a week. It was the most human he had ever sounded. Gone was the bravado. In its place was vulnerability. Speculation immediately turned to what comes next, if anything. Some suggested a long layoff, perhaps a return in 2026, carefully selecting opponents, focusing on money fights rather than competitive ambition. Names like KSI and Tommy Fury resurfaced, familiar and safer. Others floated the fantasy of Tyson Fury, a massive spectacle that would generate unimaginable attention, but raise the same questions all over again. Even those who criticized Jake couldn't deny the audacity it took to step into that ring. Wade, one of the more balanced voices, acknowledged that Jake didn't need to box. He chose to. He chose the hardest path, even if the result was predictable. There are no normal people who would have done it. money or not. That counts for something. Zane's reaction captured the shock many felt when the injury details emerged. A double broken jaw is not a minor setback. It sidelines fighters for months, sometimes longer. It forces reevaluation. Medical experts were quick to stress that health must come first. No training, no sparring, no shortcuts. Boxing will still be there if and when he's ready, but it may not welcome him the same way. December 19th, 2025 will be remembered not just as the night Jake Paul lost, but as the night the experiment reached its limit. The numbers, the stats, the knockdowns, all tell the same story. This was the second professional loss of his career, but it felt heavier than that. It felt final. Analysts Brian Campbell and Shaquille Majuri broke it down with clinical precision. Jake's strategy was elusiveness, movement, survival. It worked longer than expected, but it raised an uncomfortable question. How do you chase a title without engaging elite fighters on equal terms? Popularity can sustain a career. It can sell fights, but it can't replace skill forever. And yet, as long as people tune in, as long as broadcasters are willing to pay, Jake Paul will always have options. He understands the business model. He understands being the villain. People tune in not always to cheer, but to watch him fall. In that sense, even this loss feeds the machine. What makes this moment different is the cost. The physical toll is undeniable. The mystique is cracked. The path forward is narrower. Jake Paul survived. But survival is not the same as triumph. Regardless of how you feel about him, he stood in the ring with a two-time heavyweight champion and lived to tell the story. That takes courage. It also demands honesty about limitations. Whether this marks the end of his boxing chapter or merely a pause remains to be seen. But the illusion that Jake Paul could leapfrog into the highest tier without consequence is gone. Now the questions hang heavy in the air. Was this the final act of Jake Paul's boxing experiment, or just its harshest lesson? Should he walk away while he still can, or does the pull of the spotlight guarantee one more run? And if he does return, who should he fight next, if anyone at all? Let me know what you think. Was this fight exactly what you expected? Or did Jake Paul earn more respect than you anticipated? Do you believe his boxing career should end here, or is there still a path forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.